Hi, Joanna.
Oh, hello. Happy Hades in Dallas. It's hot.
It is hot today. I thought I was going to have a ton of Save It for the Pods because Annie Lane was with us this past week.
Yes.
I can't say any of it on the podcast.
Shoot. Does she listen?
No, but she spent a couple days with Jimmy, cousin Jimmy, and when we made the drop off, like halfway point, he was just like, Sue. And he told me he took her to family dinner at someone's place. There was a ton of people, like 20 people there or something, and they were about to pray and she was up making her plate. Stuff like that. So that's the typical funny stuff. She's just in her own little world. And it's not like she's super inappropriate. It's just she gets in people's business. So I can't tell you the story. I'll tell you offline, but so I don't know. So I don't have anything for that fun segment this week.
Something, but it's like, we like to keep it real on the pod, and sometimes not everything is like happy and rosy. I think I texted you yesterday that I was like having the worst Sunday scaries, and then it started to like spiral even more, and like all this stuff on the news is just awful, and then fucking IRS and all the things. And I had like a meltdown where I just wanted my mom. Shit, I can't cry on
Joe.
because she was like such an encourager, and she'd always be like, "You got it. It's gonna be fine." And I just wanted my mom, and I knew I can't have it.
What do you mean you don't know why you're crying? I know exactly why you're crying.
I told Matt, I was like, I know exactly what she would say. She would say, "Joanna, you're strong. You're gonna get through this. I love you, and I just think you're a genius." And I just needed to hear her to say that to me today. I didn't get it, so here we are in grief time, even though I thought I grieved her.
Yeah, I think what we're learning from talking to more people and being in the middle of grief, it's just so fluid and you don't know when it's going to hit you.
Was giggling with you like 2 seconds ago.
Yeah, and you'll go back to giggling because you have an interview to conduct.
I know. I'm like, sorry, Sandy, I've been crying. But it did make me thankful, like that I can still think of my mom as someone who was such an encourager. She was positive. She just like put strength and good words into me all the time. So I'm very thankful for that.
Yes, that's the first thing I thought of is that you do have that to call back on.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is what it is at this point. It sucks, but like you had that constant encouragement and, you'll have it even after she's gone, but I'm sorry.
I know. Sorry. But you know what? I do have favorite things.
Yay! Oh my God, you're killing me. I didn't realize yesterday was a mommy day. I just thought you were just like,
It it
you
didn't.
know,
It was just like last night. I just had it. I was just tired. I needed to go to bed. Anyways,
okay.
favorite things. I had to read this book, and I wanted to read it, but I needed to read it all in one day because I was so busy with work last week, and we're interviewing this author today, and I really wanted to read it. And I think I'm so scatterbrained. I had told you earlier, I know about this app that helps you read faster. I can't remember the name of it. Then I Googled and Googled and Googled, but I'm the worst Googler. I can't find things on the internet. And so
I
then you
can.
I know you're really good at it. So yesterday you were like, "Did you get that app?" And at first I was like, "I don't even know what you're talking about." And then I was like, "Oh yeah, that app." I was like, "No, I never found it. I can't figure out the name." And you were like, "It's Speechify." I was like, "Oh my God, why didn't I just ask you to begin with?" So I downloaded the app. I got the 3-day trial for free, but I'm probably just going to buy it. And this is the cool thing about Speechify. It's really, I think it was designed for dyslexic people. And I normally credit myself as being a very quick reader, but I was able to put the book into the app and it connects to your Kindle, and it's really, really cool. And then you can set the verbal audio speed as fast as you want, up to 4.5 times faster. My brain couldn't keep up with that, but my brain could keep up with 2.5 times faster as it was reading it to me. And I blew through that book in like 5 hours. It's genius.
Wow.
I know.
Maybe I'll look into it. But I mean, I'm such a brat. It's pricey.
I think I'm going to just stuff it down.
Yeah, if you use it every day, like who cares?
Yeah. And it will
If
read
you use,
out loud
see,
to
I
you.
don't think I would use it that much.
I could not believe how fast my brain could process the way this lady was talking so quickly. I still had the book in front of me, so I was reading along, but I was just going so much faster.
Whose voice did you pick?
Gwyneth Paltrow, which
That's who I picked. Like when I was looking at it to do it, I was gonna do it, but I was afraid I wouldn't cancel the 3-day free trial, and then I'd be on the hook and I wouldn't use it. And I have Audible and, I don't know. I just was one more thing for when Anthony's looking through, PayPal auto withdrawals. He's like, what's this? What's this? What's this? What's this? What's this? And I'm like, it's all the shit you use every day. It's every TV app. I don't know. Well, that's good.
Yeah. Do you have a
Cool.
favorite thing?
Yeah, actually, mine is the book that we both read. The author's name is Sandy Moss Motor, and she wrote a memoir, and it's called If I Had One More Brain Thing, which I love the title. And kind of when you read the book and that comes up, it's kind of a moment of levity when he's just like, oh my gosh, if I have one more thing go wrong. And it's like you kind of see this, how they're trying to have a sense of humor with dealing with FTD. Her husband had FTD and she was his caretaker. And the memoir's amazing. And I know that we've talked about this before, but sometimes when there's a book or a movie or a TV show that is dealing with dementias, it's not entirely relaxing or an escape to dive in because it's a hard topic. And, we're in the middle of it. I was in the middle of it, whatever. But this was so good. And I was hooked from the beginning. She's an excellent writer and she intertwines her poetry through it. And it all fits. It makes so much sense. And it was very enjoyable. It was a great read. And I'm really excited that you are going to be talking to her soon. Oh, and one more thing though, friend of the pod, Joyce Logan, she introduced us to Sandy. Joyce has Ruby Care Senior Advisors here in the DFW and eternally thankful for making that introduction because it was a great book and I'm excited to have her on.
I am too. I feel like I'm talking to a celebrity. I thoroughly enjoyed the book and I'm like still going through it. So normally I avoid that shit, but this was different. It didn't like affect me like that because her writing is so good and she has some sarcasm to her and some sassiness. I just liked it.
Yes, exactly. So what do you say we just get into that?
Let's do it.
Okay, I'll talk to you after.
This episode is brought to you by Ruby Care Senior Living Advisors, your trusted partner in navigating senior living options with compassion and clarity. At Ruby Care, everything starts with one simple thing: listening. Their senior care advisors take the time to truly understand what matters most to you or your loved one, from health needs and personal preferences to location and budget. Once they get to know you, they match you with senior living communities that make the most sense, because they know these communities firsthand. Whether you're looking in Dallas, Fort Worth, or somewhere in between, Ruby Care helps you feel confident every step of the way. They even assist with setting up and attending tours, offering guidance, resources, and thoughtful questions to help you make the right choice. And once you've found your new home, Ruby Care doesn't disappear. They continue to follow up, offering support with everything from moving logistics to ensuring your happiness in your new surroundings. So if you or someone you love is exploring senior living, don't go it alone. Visit rubycareseniorliving.com to connect with an advisor and experience the Ruby Care difference. Okay, I'm so excited to welcome to the podcast today Sandy Moss Motor. Sandy is the author of If I Have One More Brain Thing, memoir chronicling her journey as a caregiver to her husband Norm, who was diagnosed with FTD, which stands for Frontotemporal Degeneration. We are so honored to talk with you today and about your experiences, your insights, and the deeply human realities of caring for a loved one with dementia. Welcome to the show, Sandy.
Well, thank you, Joanna. This is a great opportunity. I'm so excited to be a part of it, to share our experience.
Well, thank you. And I read the book yesterday. I started it and I finished it and I was moved. I'm a crier, so there were moments of tears, but there were moments of hilarity and moments of sweetness. And I can't wait to dive in with this book with you because I want our readers to read it as well. So let's start from the beginning. What were some of the early signs that something was wrong, and how did Norm eventually receive an FTD diagnosis?
Yes, some early signs, even 20 years before I knew anything was going on, he would make like unusual kind of negative statements that were kind of hurtful. So one time I went down to kiss him goodnight and he said, "What are you trying to do? Show off?" And I'm just going, what? It didn't make any sense. And then when I talked to him about it the next morning, he goes, "I didn't say that. And if I did, I didn't mean it." And he blew it off. And there was no connection there to that kind of hurt me. So basically, I kind of equate that as the first time I noticed something. And then I began to notice indifference and his disconnect to our relationship. He didn't want to cuddle anymore, difficulty with intimacy. He would sit down and fall asleep almost every evening. And when I tried to talk with him, basically, he acted as if I had not said anything. He didn't equate responding to me talking to him. It was just as if it wasn't computing. So he wasn't interested in activities. He had lost his empathy. And so basically, for 6 years, from 2013 to 2019, was the core of the disease.
And I forgot to ask you this. How old was he when all of this started? Do you
Well,
remember?
let's see. He passed away at 73, so -6. So he was in his, what would it be? 67, 66, 67. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And so some of those symptoms, I think it would be hard to be like, is there something wrong with him or is he just being a jerk? You know?
It was that way. Was kind of, I'm just going, why are you acting like this? And I would be angry and hurt as a wife would be. And so basically, then it started to get more unusual. And I started to just kind of put that in the back of my mind. Something's going on. So at first I thought maybe he was having, just midlife crisis, because at that time he wanted to buy a Corvette, some of those unusual things that men might do. Women do some things too, but the car, he was a car guy. So the car was, and so I said, well, then if we can work it out financially. And he did do that, and he did get to enjoy it for a while. But those were just some of the things that he had never, would have probably done before.
Yeah. And I remember reading in the book, you eventually started to go to different types of doctors and professionals. Was it difficult to get a correct diagnosis? And were there any misdiagnoses along the way? Because this was so foreign back then.
Yes, it was foreign. And most doctors are, even after a diagnosis, and we would go to, say, even a neurologist, they'd go, well, I read about it like in a paragraph in our book. And I'd say, well, are you interested in getting to know about that? And it was an older doctor. Well, not really. It's just, yeah, I felt like there wasn't a concern. So we started out, I had Norm go to our family care physician, and I had written down some recent, really angry episodes he'd been having. And so I made him take it to the list to the doctor, and the doctor believed, me, and asked Norm if it was true. And Norm told him, yeah. So then we were sent to a neurologist, and we had an MRI, and it showed some shrinkage of brain. But at that time, we were just told this is just part of aging. And it's, like we were just having liver spats. And I'm going, excuse me?
Yeah.
It's more than that. So I kind of lived with that for a little bit. Then we went back to our primary care, and he sent him to kind of an alternative type of doctor who dealt with mental illness. So he kind of diagnosed him with having mental illness, which I did not think that was true, because this was even different. And so eventually then that doctor had a medical episode and could not come back. So that's when I found a neurologist, and that's when Norm was sent for neurological psychological testing. And that's when he got the diagnosis.
Okay. I did see an overwhelming theme of you have to be your own advocate in this book, and you have to keep pursuing. You have to go with your gut.
Yes, you have to be very persistent. You have to trust your instincts about knowing this guy in your life for 30 some years. You have to stand up for that. And I tried not to be a mean person, but I would be firm and say, there's something more going on. We have to pursue this.
Yeah, I think that's so important for our listeners to hear because I know they're going through it as well. So, as the disease progressed, what were the most challenging changes you witnessed emotionally, physically, or behaviorally?
Well, Under FTD, there are various variants of the disease, and the top one is called behaviors. So when you think about that, you can think about a child has behavior issues, and then you reprimand them or you guide them or whatever. But these manifest as anger, frustration, normal things. His actions would be way over responsive. It just didn't make any sense. I talked about in the book about we were going to go on a date to a car show, and he is a car guy, and he didn't have his sleeves rolled up, and he had them unbuttoned, which was so unusual. He always buttoned his sleeves or rolled them up. So being the wife, I said, not angrily, I just said, "Oh, do you want to roll up your sleeves? It's hot today." And he just turned and went into an immediate red-faced shaking tirade. His whole body was shaking. I'd never seen him like that before, ever. And I'm backing up and he's still going. And he just stands there. And finally, I just walked to my bedroom and locked the door. And at that time, he had his own bedroom, which is what he wanted. And so he went. And then for 3 days, that just went on and on. He would come out and yell, say, "You're going to hell." And, just all these things that he would never have said to me, and treat me like I am something foreign that, I just didn't understand the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, this
And
was your loving husband, so I can't even
yes,
imagine trying to process that.
I just sat there in total shock. I stood there in total shock, and I went to the bedroom and I locked the door, and I'm going, I have just locked the door against my husband, and I'm
And did you
crying.
lock the door because you felt physically afraid?
I did. I think my instincts kicked in. And I didn't say too much about this in the book, but I had come from an abusive first marriage. So that just kicked in that instinct that you better back up, you better lay low, just get away, and, just let it cool down. Yeah.
Actually wondered about that when I was reading the book because I
Uh,
was like, I don't know if I would have locked the door. I wonder what's behind that. And you also wrote something else in the book that I just totally connected with. You said that when you were younger, maybe one of your parents had some mental illness and you went off to college as soon as you could because it was like too much to manage their emotions and feelings. And that started to trigger things when Norm started doing this, like your childhood trauma as well. I don't know why that
yes, it
just stuck
did.
with me.
Yes, it did. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Yes, it did. And I had gone through therapy as an adult to try to understand my mom's mental illness, who came from a very abusive father family, family father, and alcoholic and etc. And then my mom just never seemed to be able to cope. And then she had an issue with some drugs, medications for pain, and that turned into abuse. And so basically, it brought that back up. Yeah. After Norm's death, I went through therapy to try to pull that all together. Yeah.
I can tell you're very self aware of your emotions. It's really, really impressive.
Well, thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah. You can always tell when people have been in therapy. Like, you just know. Like me. Okay. So, we kind of talked to you about this a little bit offline, but I think it's so important to bring up because it's never talked about. One aspect of dementia that's rarely discussed is intimacy. And I really appreciated your honesty in the book about how FTD affected your physical and emotional connection with Norm. Would you be open to talking about how that part of your relationship changed?
Yes. And as I mentioned just previously, he started not wanting to be with me. And in the book, I say he would physically, if I tried to cuddle, just push me over on the couch. And I would say, what's the matter? Oh, I'm just tired. He always had a reason, but that wasn't who he was. And so that started very early. And then ep16 came into play about that time. And so I had him, go to the doctor, but the medications did not help. And so eventually we realized that was an early part of frontotemporal dementia. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. And so then I had to deal with that loss of relationship. And there was a book called Ambiguous Loss, and I can't think of the author off the top of my head, but that was a helpful book for me to say, you do lose the person and that part of your marriage. And then you have to evaluate your marriage vows and how is your relationship going to be now and what do you choose to do. but it was sad. It was difficult. And sometimes I think he missed it. And he would say that in therapy that he went to for a short time, but then they would give him suggestions, hug your wife, peck her on the cheek. He would do it one time, literally, and then would never remember. So it's that loss of awareness, and it is a sort of a medical term, that loss of awareness of the day to day that was going on with him was just calling.
Okay. Yeah. It's really, really interesting. So, as you were in the caregiving role and the coping role, what were some of the most helpful resources or support systems you relied on during Norm's illness?
Yes, I'm going to turn to my notes here so I make sure that I remember these. So I have to find that. So this might be a
Yeah,
place you
no
can.
problem at all.
Yes, because I've got my notes here. Some of the resources that, I'm not finding it quickly. I never find things quickly.
We're not in a hurry.
Yes. Okay. So basically, once we were given the diagnosis in the doctor's office, they did suggest AFTD, the Association of Frontotemporal Degeneration, which I did connect with by phone. And then I still received the magazine that they put up about every 3 months. And so that was my first connection with where to start looking for information about this. So there wasn't a whole lot. The doctor would tell me, say we go for every 3 months for a checkup, and I would say what was going on, and she'd say, "Oh, that's just FTD," and I'd be going, "But I want to understand that."
Yeah.
I want to get the overall picture of what I'm going to be facing. Of course, it's different for everyone. But then there was a book out recommended by the doctor called So It's Not Alzheimer's. And it was written by medical doctors saying this is frontotemporal. And each chapter was written by a different doctor. Sometimes it was kind of high medical jargon that was kind of hard to understand. But as the disease progressed and I devoured and went back to it off and on, it helped me to kind of see where he was progressing and which variants that he was exhibiting at that time. But for emotional support, I just read. I'm a reader. I just read whatever I found. And one was called Green Vanilla Tea, and it was her husband had FTD, and then it went into ALS, and he was in his 40s. So there were young children to deal with. I just ambiguous loss. Then that was kind of knowledge, emotional support. And then it's like Brene Brown. Okay, I just started reading her and just trying to figure out where am I at here? What can I do in this difficult situation? And then old standbys that I had read were Sue Monk Kidd. I followed her since she was an early author in magazines. Anne Morrow Lindbergh. I mean, she went through so much in her life and took care of her husband at the end. So I started to find people to identify with. And then Gladys Tabor, I found her. And so I ordered her books. And she lost her friend, and she wrote a book about grief. I have reread that thing 3 times at least. Then for physical support for him, daycare. I discovered daycare just up the street, and that gave me a place to take him so that I could get the basic, appointments, grocery shopping, and things like that. That gave me a break for that. And then at respite care, I had one respite care time. I got a grant from AFTD. That was very helpful, and I planned a little staycation for myself. So, and then eventually assisted living. Yeah.
Okay. On the flip side, were there any resources or forms of support that you wished existed at the time?
Well, I remember the last doctor that we had, which was geriatric internist. He said, unfortunately, there's very little offered, say, for under insurance and so on for FTD. If he had ALS, which is a cousin disease, there's so much known about it. There's all these studies, which there's very little on FTD even yet. And then there were support, aspects in place, like maybe you could have help with in healthcare and things like that. But because Norm could do all of his ADLs, which that is dressing himself, being able to eat by himself, doing the basics of life by himself, then he did not qualify for much help. So we basically paid out of pocket.
And it's so expensive. So
It
expensive.
is. And that was my big panic. It was my biggest, like, wake up at night, scared, worried that we would run out of money. And we were getting closer. Yeah.
We're
So,
in a point right now with my mom where we're trying to calculate how much longer she can stay in her memory care unit
yes.
based on how much money she has. It's like we should not be having to worry about that, but we are.
We should not. And it is a worry for everyone and that has a loved one or a spouse or a parent or whatever in, yeah, a facility care. And I know it's more expensive than it was 6 years ago. I wish that we had more understanding of what families are going through financially. A previous podcast I did that was based on the financial worries. That was quite interesting. That
Well,
someone
we'd love to have you back for that because
yeah.
it's kind of our soapbox about flashes to Medicaid and all of these things that caregivers are experiencing right now, but that's for another topic. Okay, so one of the things I loved in your book, and you actually signed our book with 3 words. I just love it: truth, strength,
Yes.
and
Okay. I'm
clarity.
just looking at my notes. Here it is. Truth. So I asked for, so I'm sitting here one day after the diagnosis and I'm thinking, what do I need? I'm going to need a lot and I don't even know what I need to go through this. And so I thought of 3 things: truth. And I needed to face each moment with truth, offering me the ability to address the observations and needs accordingly. Then I could get him the right kind of care if I was being honest about it. Where's he at that moment? Paraphrasing that. Then strength. With energy and power for my mind, body, and soul, I gathered knowledge, met the challenges presented, and began each day caregiving all over again. So it gave me the ability to do it the next day. Then clarity. So without clarity in mind, I felt I would succumb to the overwhelming duties and decisions of caregiving. It was bigger than either of us, probably the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. And then you have all the emotions going along with that. So I wanted clarity of mind at that point.
I think that's just so strong and so powerful. And I can't believe that you were able to come up with that in the midst of everything you were going through.
Well, I don't know why I'm wired that way, but I've been through different things in my life. And I guess words and definitions mean something to me. And if I can have something concrete to lean on in the ambiguous moments that you don't know what to do, then I think I could always say, you can do this. You know, it wasn't that I was great at everything, but I really tried very hard to, do the best I could for him.
Yes, and it comes through in the book. It just shows, I could just feel how much you loved him and love him still.
Yes, I do. It's been 6 years and I still think of him. Yeah.
Of course. One of the hardest choices for many caregivers is whether or when to move a loved one into assisted living. I know that was really hard for my family. How did you come to that decision and what made you feel confident or conflicted about it?
Well, first of all, it was a worry of money. So I avoided it for a while, okay, thinking I have to just keep doing this, even though I was getting to a point at about 5.5 years, I was exhausted and
Yeah.
so on. But there was an angry episode, and I tell about it in the book, that I realized that he could have hurt me severely or, done me in because of his inability to control himself and his emotions and his anger and frustration, which is what caused the anger, I think. And so at that point, I'd always said to myself, if I ever feel like I'm in danger, that will be that kind of danger. That will be the point that I make that decision. I knew it was coming. The doctor was telling me it's getting closer. He's, less inhibited. Yeah. Or he isn't uninhibited. And so basically, I knew it was coming, but I was just trying to deal with, the money issue. And then I went searching and then finally hired Ruby Care. And a lady called Joyce Logan came into my life, and I think you know who she is. And
Yep.
she basically, yes, she referred me to you, or yeah, you guys. And so basically, then we went seriously looking. We gave it a week to find something. And it was difficult because a couple places wouldn't take FTD. They were fine with me signing up until I put the diagnosis down. And they go, we don't take FTD people. And I would say, why? Well, we just don't. And so basically, I think it's because of the issue with behaviors sometimes being, intense. I know they had to take care of considering other, residents if he would be out of hand. But I must say, in all the 8 months he was in assisted living, he never once exhibited that kind
Isn't
of
that
behavior.
fascinating?
Yes, it is. And again, that aspect of him being able to control it around other people. But around me, he had anger, great anger, and felt I controlled him all the time. And I tried not to, but if he's climbing ladders and he has no balance, I have to make him get down. And so I had boundaries and I had to assist him when he fell frequently with the
Of
lack of
course.
balance. And so basically, but he saw me as the enemy, which was the hardest thing for me to accept, I think. Yeah.
Totally. It had to be so difficult. And I want to point out to our listeners who may be going through this right now and you're wondering if it's time to move your loved one into assisted living. We see this recurring theme all the time that eventually it boils down to safety. You moved Norm for your safety and for his. We moved my mom because she was no longer safe to live in a house by herself. She was leaving the stove on. She was taking too many of her medications. And it honestly made the excuse or the reasoning to her easier because we could say, this isn't our decision. This is based on your safety. And so I think people just need to put that in their back pocket that if they're struggling to decide or how do we explain this to mom that we need to move her, always think about their safety first and then approach it that way.
Yes. And that's kind of how I did approach it. Also, I was getting very tired. And so I
Yeah.
realized I was getting thin, wearing thin. And I didn't want, not to be patient, but it was just getting harder because it used to be like, well, every week he did something. Now it's every moment of every day almost. And yes, he would leave the stove on. He would leave the sink running. He would go out and try to use the saw to cut down limbs, but the saw would be heading right toward his arm. And,
Oh,
just all the time. I couldn't leave him alone at all. The doctor said, don't. And I already understand that. So then that has to change. That changed my life again. Well, that's where the daycare came in, and so on. And so you're just constantly having to change with their changes. And yes, so when I did take him to see a couple places and I did explain to him that this was time, and he was pretty good about it. I think it made him feel bad to leave his home. But again, in the book, I talk about how he wanted his own apartment. He got his own apartment. And basically, that was my biggest leverage with him because he wanted to live alone.
yeah, I found that fascinating too. It was not the situation with my mom, but she's got a different disease. So, how did you protect your own identity during this time, emotionally, spiritually, even creatively? What did your self care look like?
Well, my self-care at the beginning was more like just get knowledge, so you can deal with this. And so I didn't practice that too much in the beginning. But as the years went by, probably the last 2 years, I really realized I had to take time for myself. Sometimes a lunch with a friend, phone calls, things like that with friends and family. I also kept teaching my art classes because
I love
that grounded me and I didn't think about the disease during that 2 hour session with my students. I could focus. And, I sometimes would take a nap when I took them to daycare. Sometimes I talked about going and getting chocolate bars and ice cream and sitting in my car in Stonebridge at some of their little lakes and watch the ducks. It was because I
yes.
was worried about money. So it's like, okay, what can you do? And so basically, I just did little things that gave me some peace of mind. And then reading, I just, read more and more, sometimes just funny things. Yeah, or sometimes just casual things. Didn't have to be getting knowledge. It could just be for enjoyment. And I would sometimes do a little shopping just to go out, and not necessarily buy anything. And I talk about going to the grocery store and touching fruit and vegetables and watching people interact and talk to each other because it was normal and I didn't have normalcy. Kind of a strange thing, but I didn't do it every day. But every once in a while, I just thought I have to get out of here. Yeah, and go be normal.
point. Just feeling normal again because you forget what it's like. That other people aren't dealing with this every single day.
Yes, yes, it becomes your new normal, and I didn't wanna really succumb to all of that. Yeah, that and I think for you, you have to have your own life as an adult beyond your
Yeah, and
mother.
of course
Yeah,
there's guilt that comes along with that, that
yeah,
I can't have my mom living with me because I've got all these other things going on, but
yes.
it is what it is.
It is. And I did mention too in the book, and I think in my notes, that they start to fit into the other world. They start to fit into the demented world, okay,
Mhm.
much more than they do what we would call the normal world. And so when I realized that one day, and that was confirmed to me by someone in the business, that just kind of took some of that guilt away. Not 100%, but I also realized guilt is not productive, for caring for your mom or caring for yourself or anything. Did I have it? Yes. I wasn't perfect in this trip. But when I realized he was fitting more in a different world that I could not enter because I'm not there mentally and physically, then that let me let him go to that world a little easier.
That is such a good point that I never thought about that, but once you said it, I'm like, yeah, that makes total sense. My mom
Yeah.
does live in a different world.
Yes,
Yeah.
and they need kind of that protection for that world,
Mhm.
smaller space, not seeing the frustrations of things she can no longer do at home or with family. They need that, I think, and that was, like, really something that just helped me be okay with it.
Yes, I get that. So let's move on to the grief and the healing part of your story. After Norm passed away, how did you begin to process your grief? Clearly, I'm still processing my grief and my mom hasn't even died yet. But what's helped you most in your healing journey?
Yes, and I'm still grieving sometimes. Like, I think, what, last Saturday evening, for some reason, I felt very alone. I miss the relationship in the evenings, I think, or on the weekends when we would do things together. And so I just had a good sob, you know,
Yeah.
but I thought, have a good sob and then go on. And then it just is the outlet for your, pent up concerns and tension and sadness and so on. So basically, I did do the therapy for 3 months, and it was based on a book, and I can't tell you the name of it at the moment, but it was based on a book by the therapist. And I just visited by Zoom with her every week for 3 months. And I just set aside the money to do that. And we talked about the things I had experienced before, how it brought that back up, and then how to how to get back to remembering the good times I had with Norm. I think that was really hard. And then what do you do with yourself? After he died that first week, I'm just sitting in the house going, so what am I going to do? He's not here to take care of me. And I didn't know what to do because it's been my life for so long. And so then I had to start to evaluate. So I bought 2 puppies.
It's the best solution.
Well, kind of. They were also training together like toddlers, potty training. So, and I still have them. They're laying at my feet right now. And so I bought 2 puppies. And I think that brought me to a realization that I had a new focus, and that was important. But then I also decided I need to connect with friends and family and start to figure out what to do with my life. Then, unfortunately, COVID came along, and then we're quarantined, and I'm going, are you kidding? And so, my family had always been into my paternal side, had been into genealogy. So I thought, I'm just going to get online and see what I could find. And oh my gosh, I just followed this journey for months, and I got really obsessive about it and found, when we came from England to the colonies in 1642, who knew? Not that long after the Mayflower, and so on. And so now I have all these books. Then later on, my father passed away and I inherited all the photos. So I just put all of that together and started to build our family history from 1395 up. And so that, I think I needed projects. I'm kind of project oriented anyway. And so I needed a project, and that became a project. I also didn't want to live in this house anymore because it was our home. It wasn't mine. But I couldn't afford, to make a drastic financial change, and I didn't want to make a change too quickly and then regret it. So I just hired a local painter that my friend knew, and I had him paint the office, and I had the bedroom painted and the bathroom. And then some of the things that were ours, I decided to donate and then maybe replace them or not with things that maybe I was more interested in now. So I started to think about, how would I want my space to be for me, not for the two of us, but for me. And so I have lots of things we purchased together and did together, but I also changed things out. And he was 6'4" and I'm 5'2", and no sofa fit me. So I
Good.
donated the sofa, which was getting kind of natty anyway. And I went looking for short, shallow sofas, and I found one at a consignment store for a few $100s and had it delivered to my house. And I still enjoy it because my feet can touch the floor. So it was kind of really silly things like that, but it made it my space. I fit now in this space. And,
Yeah,
you know, and there are things that remind me of Norm every day, but it's things that were happy times. So,
that's good.
yeah. But there are things that are just now my new history.
And that's
And I
also,
think that's healing. Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you.
So, as we reflect on your story, what would you say to someone who's just beginning this journey of caregiving for a loved one with FT?
Yes. For the diagnosis of FTD, I would say contact the Association of FTD right away. I am just, they have now much more information, and they can, they have things online that can share, people writing about their experiences, of their spouse with FTD, etc. In fact, if you check my website, they asked me to write an essay, and you can find the essay there based on the book. But they just offer so much more as they have grown and received, funding too. I would say address your initial personal shock of the diagnosis. Because in the book, I say, I'm in the backyard and all of a sudden I can't breathe. And I'm having an anxiety attack, which I had never had one before. So I didn't realize how overwhelming that diagnosis was. So I had to really stop and think about, how it's affecting me. Yeah. And what can I do to protect myself from that? Also, education. FTD is crazy. Dementia is crazy to deal with, in quotes. Okay. They're not crazy, but it feels crazy. And the education is key. And I'm one for education. I think if you read the books, if you go to support groups, if you talk to people, you're going to learn just a little more each time, which then will be there in the back of your head when an episode comes and you're going, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I get that. I now see what's happening. And then I can start to learn to deal with it. Because every time there was a plateau downward, there were more new things to deal with. So learning to deal with his outbursts were really hard. And there's a lot written about it, but until you're in it, it's kind of hard to remember what to do. But I did give myself boundaries. And I said, if this is what he's doing, I will walk away and let him just chill out himself. Just go to another room. And that bedroom with the door lock was sometimes my 5-minute safety. And then I could come back out and deal with it. Just kind of try to divert him. Sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't. Usually I might suggest that he just go to his room and, just take a break. And usually he fell asleep and then it was over. Yeah. So
Okay.
those are really difficult. So setting boundaries for his safety and my safety became really key as the progressions came. I really worried I would become ill and then who would take care of him. And so I really felt like that I had to stay well and protect my emotions and my physical well-being. And that's when I started to take more care of myself. Time to relax, time to get away, time to rest. Also being honest about how much you can take. I've read books where spouses put their demented spouse soon after the diagnosis. It's not a right or wrong. It wasn't a judgment. It was more like, this is what I knew I could bear. And I took a lot of brunt with this, mainly because of money, but also because I just wanted him to have good care. And I felt like I could do it as long as I could. But then when things started to take a toll, I had to be really honest. I don't know how much longer I can do this. And I think I had to be honest and say, I can't go much longer. And I think if that's a truth for you, then you have to accept that truth and act on that truth. And we're all in different places, different health aspects of our own personal selves. If we have children, and say if you're younger and you have a spouse and children. So you have to weigh all that. It's not a one answer. And that's where I think being kind to yourself and not being guilty all the time, yeah, is important to consider. It's a battle though. Care options. Daycare just became my option because it just worked for my schedule. Yeah. And what I wanted to do. Then when it came to the facility, do your homework, check out, go interview. Online, you can find questionnaires, what to ask people, which I found they didn't always like being asked, but because mine was kind of long because I'm always very detailed and so on. But I learned to also use my intuition, like look around, sense how are they interacting with the residents? Are they all just sitting there starry eyed at a TV, or are they being asked and motivated to do an exercise class, to go to art class? And so I found this wonderful place for Norm in McKinney, and it just was the perfect place for where he was at. He art classes, they did an art show and he got to show his carvings and his artwork and the carvings that he did when he was well. And even at daycare, Norm wanted to show his carvings and do a little show and tell, which wasn't how Norm really was. He just lost those inhibitions. And so I went to the lady, the couple who ran it, and they go, yeah, great. So we set a time, and some of the family members came of the other daycare people, and he did like he was presenting at work.
I love it.
I have photos of it, a little video. I mean, I just thought, I'm goosebumping right now because that gave him a moment of being real and presenting himself in good light when he didn't always have the ability to do that. So I just look for opportunities to do that. And if he said he wanted to do something, like when he was in daycare, they were going to have a style show and all the ladies were going to do the style show. And he says to me, I want to do it. So I went to the program director and I said, he wants to do it. She goes, great. So she came and talked to him while I was there. And I have a video of him strutting, honestly, strutting down the aisle. And it was a family time where a dinner was going to be offered for the family after the style show. And everybody was like, whistling and clapping and yelling, yay, Norm. And he had his cane and he's just strutting down and he's looking left to right. I mean, I have a video of it and I will always cherish that moment because it wasn't too much longer after that he was gone. So if he said he wanted to do something, then I would jump on it. Sometimes it didn't work out for him later. He would renege, but if he wanted to do it. So looking for those possibilities, before they don't ask anymore. That was, again, key. So, but not feeling guilty, at least as little as possible. Because did I feel guilty? Oh, yeah. I mean, I couldn't fix it. I didn't cause that disease. No one causes this disease of our loved ones. And so I tried, even though I might be overwhelmed, to basically just say, I'm doing the best I can and try to accept that. Yeah.
That's so good. I think you made an interesting point that we always say on this podcast is that once you've been in the caregiver dementia world, all judgment towards other people in the world goes right out the window.
That is true.
Yeah,
It's
if you
so
have an
hard.
experience, it's just so hard. And however you're dealing with it is the right way to deal with it at that moment.
That's right. And so when I said, I read this book and this woman, just put her husband right away into some facility. And I'm going, I don't know what she was experiencing from him. We don't know. And so for her to be strong enough to write that book, I got encouragement from that book. I didn't take it as a negative. And she meant it to say it is a personal choice. And I thought that was really brave of her to say, what happened. And then she tried to put her life back together, But she always visited him, but she was just trying to help herself and to be well, and in all aspects. So it's a really hard decision, but I think you almost know if you trust the knowledge and your wisdom within. I think you just kind of know when it's time. They go screaming and hollering sometimes, but in the long run, yes. And that's really hard, but in the long run, they settle in, and that routine for them is very helpful. Yeah, it's needed. Yes.
Well, listen, I have one more question, and I'm going off script just a little bit, but I'm just
Okay.
curious. After looking back on all of your experience with Norm and being a caregiver, what did you learn about yourself?
Oh, wow, you didn't ask that ahead. Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I would love to answer that question. I learned I was stronger than I thought I could be, and this is going to make me cry.
I'll cry right with you.
I learned what love really was, because sometimes a relationship, it's give and take. But I learned when he couldn't give, I still wanted to lovingly give. That, was hard to do, but that's what I chose. And I'm really happy that I don't have regrets about that. And I guess just knowing I have strength. And that even entered into being on my own now for 6 years. It's been 6 years in May since he passed away. And that is, I've had things break. My house flooded with water. I had foundation issues. Okay, so all these things in life that happen normally, I started feeling like wasted, like every little thing that happened. The refrigerator died, the oven died, the stove, the washer dryer died. It was 20 years and everything was dying after he died. And I was overwhelmed with it. And then I thought, but you can do this. You can look online and get information. You can make a decision. I went and bought my first car by myself, and I did my research. I knew how much money and how much I was going to spend, and I chose something that would be in that ballpark, and I chose my first car. So I'm driving home, and Norm has at a church in McKinney, he has a plaque in their memory garden. And I drove by and I said, "Did I do good, Norm?" And he said, "Yeah, you did good." I mean, he didn't say it, but I could hear him saying that. And so basically, I started to say, I can do good. I can do this. I'm smart. I'm capable. And so does it sometimes overwhelm me? Yes. But then I sit down and I give myself about a day, and then I go, okay, you've had this little pity party, which isn't even a bad thing. It's an okay thing to be overwhelmed by something. But then now, where do I start? What knowledge do I need? Knowledge is always so important to me. And then I just work it out. Sometimes I'm really tired through the process because it might take weeks to say, do the bathroom shower over because it's falling apart. But I'm really pleased with how it turned out. I'm an interior designer at heart. I'm just love it. I always have. And so it was really fun to design some of the stuff. So I thought there's fun to this too. So, I get overwhelmed, a problem comes up, and then I try to solve it. And it doesn't always go smoothly. Workers don't always, sometimes I make them come back if they don't finish it up or something, right? But I am capable of handling these decisions and this process in life as I age. Yeah.
Love that. I love that. Well, listen, Cindy, thank you so much for sharing your story with such honesty and heart and wisdom. And for those of you who want to read more, if you know me personally, I'm getting this book for you. Sandy's memoir, If I Have One More Brain Thing, is available at www.sandymossmotor.com. And we will link it in our show notes and on our Instagram as well. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. I've really, really enjoyed talking to you. And I know that this episode is going to mean a lot to a lot of people.
I hope so. That's my goal. It's nice to have a face with your voice and name. And thank you. It was very comfortable to talk with you and share it's our story. I don't say it's my story. It's our story. And
that's right.
I just appreciate this opportunity so much. It meant a lot to me.
Okay. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
If this podcast means something to you, it would mean so much to us if you'd be willing to take 30 seconds to do these 3 things. First, can you follow or subscribe to You Forgot That I Existed? Following the pod helps you because you'll never miss an episode, and it helps us because you'll never miss an episode.
To do this, just go to the You Forgot That I Existed show page on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and then just tap the plus sign or click on follow. This is the most important thing for the pod.
While you're there, if you'd be willing to give us a 5-star rating and review and share an episode you love with a friend, we would be so grateful. We appreciate you very much. You Forgot That I Existed is created and hosted by Sue Nicolaitis and Joanna Anderson.
For questions or comments, please email us at youforgotpodcast@gmail.com.